Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's Michelle here. Hey, so I want to talk about being a leader and making decisions. Okay, so I can't even tell you how many conversations with people during this pandemic about decisions, making decisions, problem solving. So, quick question before we start. What is your relationship to making a decision? Do you make a decision promptly and then move on? Do you make a decision and know I'm going to choose the best decision right now and then, we'll reevaluate as we go? Do you have maybe a process of overanalyzing before you make a decision? I've worked with a lot of leaders that do that, right? So they think about, they talk about, they spend a lot of hours thinking about, am I making the right decision? Is this the best decision, right? Maybe you worry a little bit after you've made a decision, or maybe you do what I call re-deciding. So you make a decision and then all of a sudden you're paralyzed by that wasn't the right decision, so let me change that, right? Or do you make a decision and maybe give it to your team, but then you're in that micromanaging mode? Yeah. So I've seen it all. All right. So, quick question. What would happen if you made a decision and you didn't focus on it anymore after you made it? What would happen if you made a decision and that was the last time you thought about it? Okay? What would happen if you made a decision and the only time you thought about it was to really imagine, kind of crystal ball thinking, right? To imagine how well it's going to go, right? So you're not re-deciding, you make the decision and then you think about how awesome it's going to be when it's done. Okay? So what do you think would happen? Well, if you're like a lot of my coaching clients, one thing that you can think of that's going to happen is everything is going to fall apart. Okay? That's what I hear all the time. Oh, that somehow by just the sheer will of their thinking and their thoughts, they're going to make whatever happen. Okay? Well, the science doesn't actually say that that's what's going to happen. Okay? If you do some study into worry and concern and this sort of nervous negative energy, it actually will keep you from progressing, right? Think about that. If you're in this place of worry, you are really in a fearful place in your brain. And we know from the brain science that when your brain is stressed, you solve problems less, your creativity plummets, and you kind of start to lose focus of the here and now, okay? So when your brain is stressed, one thing that it does is it starts to send all of those emotions throughout your body, negative hormones, really, and you start to perpetuate your worries, okay? Now, the opposite is also true. When you make a decision, and then you sit and you think about, what is that going to look like when it's done, right? So, for example, I'm thinking about a current program that I'm building out. It's going to basically be to help speakers and trainers in the early childhood profession to up-level their game so that they can become better speakers, but also maybe build it into a successful business, right? And that comes directly out of this idea of, in the pandemic, I have learned a ton. My business has skyrocketed, and other people in our field, unfortunately, they haven't grown that much. So I really want to share with them the wisdom, right? So I've already made the decision I'm doing that. And yes, I'm going to go through my thinking and, really, really play around with that and build it out. There's still work to be done, right? However, when I think about it, I don't think about should I do it or should I not. That decision is done. But I do think about what's it going to feel like when it's done? Who am I going to get to work with? What am I going to learn from them, right? So really taking the pressure off of you as the leader, make a decision, do it rather quickly, be on your way. The greats, if you really study some of the greats in our past history, Edison, Darwin, Bertrand Russell, C.G. Sweets, who was a corporate executive at General Electric when it was first coming about, every single one of them said that The idea of rest or napping, doing something that was not work, something that was restful, gave them more inspiration than not. And you see, we tend to think I've got to be on all the time, right? I think Thomas Edison, we can all agree, was quite successful, right? And he had a way of making a decision. But he also said, hey, the value of a nap is that it's going to help kind of, what I call it, kind of simmering the pot, right? Everything gets inside your head, it kind of simmers and boils around in there and comes to you, right? So, do you worry or do you rest? Do you work really hard to make something happen, or do you wait for the results to come to you? Because one thing I know is if you're like most leaders, especially new leaders, you feel like the whole world is literally on your shoulders, and everything about you just has to make things happen, make things work, right? Well, that's not true. That's not what the science says. That's not what the grades say, okay? So if I were to give you any sort of advice, it would really be to think about, what's your relationship to making decisions? What's your relationship to this idea of rest, getting rest when you need to? Do you try to make things happen, or do you try to invite them to happen? They're two different things. Okay. So for example, one thing I know is that as I'm building out this program, so there's certain things that need to be done, right? So I've got to come up with my curriculum. I've got to come up with the different formats of how I want to give that off. I have to come up with, examples and stories. So I will create all of that. Absolutely. But I'm never going to once question myself that that's a decision that I should make. Okay. It's done. We're moving on. Okay. So if this is something that you feel like you need help with, would you please reach out to me? I would love to help you, kind of give some resources or just chat with you and make sure that you're on the right decision train, so to speak, okay? So feel free to reach out. I would love to chat with you, all right? So with that, I release you into the wild. Go forth and prosper. Have an amazing day, and we'll catch you next time. All right, bye-bye.